My extremism is limited to, going to mass on Sundays, having 5 children, being in a long-term monogamous marriage, and believing that children do best when they're raised by their mother and father.
For people that read this book and they're like, Peachy is encouraging me to homestead.
I have never milked a goat. You're welcome, goats. I make fun of people on the left. I make fun of feminists. I feel like mockery is one of our very few rhetorical weapons that we have.
How do you get past the natural inclination, I think, and even I struggle with this sometimes, to just offer disclaimers and not try to offend everyone?
You're apologizing. And as soon as you're apologizing, you're losing. And why bother? Read your message. You're just undercutting every single thing you believe in and every single thing that you're saying. What is the point?
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the LOOPcast. Today, I might be joined by the funniest guest we've had so far on the program. Today, I'm joined by a woman known as Peachy Keenan. She wrote a book called Domestic Extremist, A Practical Guide to Winning the Culture War, and she has a hilarious Twitter account. And yes, that's a pseudonym, correct?
Yes, this is not my real name. Correct.
Okay. So this is going to be a fun one, Peachy. So how did you come to become so extreme?
Yes, like my book says, I'm a domestic extremist. Of course, the joke is that I'm not actually a domestic extremist. According to the FBI's definition, I'm just extremely domestic.
Have you been in any school board meetings recently, or?
Yeah, no, not yet. My extremism is limited to, going to mass on Sundays, having 5 children, being in a long-term monogamous marriage, and believing that children do best when they're raised by their mother and father. And these are now extreme positions. And I basically have become a radical fanatic for someone who lives here in Los Angeles.
Gotcha. And hubsosexual, is that correct?
Well, no, yes, I am a husbosexual.
Oh, husbo. Sorry, I didn't even say it right.
People can make up their own sexual orientations and gender identities. So I identify as a husbosexual. And what that means is that I am only attracted to men who identify as my husband.
Mm.
Right now, that's just one person, but you never know.
That's extreme capital E. Everything that we've heard so far, extreme capital E. So you said LA, and that's definitely an extreme place to be a pro-life Catholic. How did you end up in the LA area?
Well, I'm from here. I was born and bred in Los Angeles, on the west side of Los Angeles. I grew up as a very secular atheist. I never set foot in any kind of, place of worship in the first 30 years of my life. And I was raised to believe that religion was dumb, was a waste of time, no such thing, you're too smart for that. And I was just basically this sort of upper middle class, secular, meritocratic, proto-feminist, raised by the culture. In other words, I didn't know anything. I was a half-baked liberal, a half-baked feminist. And when I came out of college, my elite university, I just basically had assumed, I had kind of bought into all the feminist lies. I mean, all of it, just don't get married. Your goal is to avoid marriage. Your goal is to avoid pregnancy. You don't want that to bog you down. You want to, do whatever you want to do in the moment. You want to pursue a career. You want to, find cute guys, whatever, all the whole package. We all me and my friends all believed in it. And it wasn't until much later in life that I had my road to Damascus moment where I realized, oh shoot, that was all a mistake.
That is quite a metaphor. So what was your road to Damascus moment?
Politically, I kind of had my awakening really on 9/11, where I realized other people on the left are burning the U.S. flag. Wait a second, aren't we supposed to be patriots? So that was sort of my first entry into political conservatism. And once those scales kind of fell from my eyes, I was still kind of a social liberal. I was still pro-choice. My friends had abortions and I was supportive of them. Totally, it's a clump of cells. And then really it wasn't until I met my future husband in my late 20s. He was the first conservative, pro-life person I had ever met in my entire life. Ever.
Wow.
I had never been in the same room with someone who was pro-life, ever, okay? And so he was, he's a smart guy, and he likes to debate, and we would have these debates. And, in the process of kind of wooing me and courting me, I was at first I was kind of horrified, what will my friends think? I can't date this person. I'll be blackballed.
If I could ask you on that, because I think that happens a lot, and actually probably now more so from the male side, where they're meeting someone that maybe has much different views and much different beliefs. What got you past that initial, like, oh my gosh, who's this crazy human being alien that believes these things, to like actually seeing him as, oh, this could be a potential partner?
Yeah, well, I think, when it's someone who's like one of your, someone kind of your age, who's also attractive, who you like, that helps. The toxic masculinity works. Okay. And this is not coming from some old man lecturing me or screaming at me. This is coming from someone who's cool and smart and someone that I was like starting to date and like. So that helps convince you. And I think that I was sort of ripe for transformation already because I had seen just the ravages of feminism already by just life experience. In my own life, my friends' lives, it was obvious that, there was a better way. And so I think I was ready to hear. I was never like a full, blue-haired feminist or anything like that. And so I think I was ready to be converted, and partially I just, luckily met a person willing to spend the time to convert me.
Yeah, for sure. And I know this is kind of a conjecture, I guess. Would you say that there's a significant portion of men and women that maybe kind of have those milquetoast, run-of-the-mill, left-leaning views that it's just until they meet someone that's intellectually serious to have a debate with? Like, for example, you didn't seem very entrenched in those views. It just seemed kind of the views of the culture at the time. Do you think that exists now, or it's become more extreme and entrenched?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. For me, they were definitely skin deep. I never really thought too much about it. At the time, people weren't as political as they are. Their whole identity wasn't wrapped around politics and specific issues. It was really more like, we want to just have fun. And what are the things that will enable our fun having? It does feel like, especially younger women, college age women are much more radical, and they've been now raised in it, been drinking it in for so long. And if they let go, then the social cost is higher for them because of social media. They can be outed as far right extremists, and they'll lose all their social credibility. They'll lose their friend group, and that's your currency on Instagram and TikTok. That's all there is. That's your life. And if you get outed as someone who, well, maybe they don't fully support, full-term abortion, that can be really bad for you. And so it's much harder, I think, to crack those nuts, no pun intended. And it's one of the reasons I wrote my book, was hopefully to peel off some of the women who can still kind of be shown the light. And women are, I think, pushing back on this notion of like, young women need to have it all. They don't need men. And I think some young girls are like, wait, hold on a second. Maybe I do want a man.
Yeah, for sure. And this could be a good opportunity to go into your book. I mean, I'm really struck by so many parts of it, but you said a lot of the things that feminism you felt had taken from you personally, and I'd imagine probably have only accelerated over time. And some of the things, I just have some in front of me: fleeting fertility, the unique role of women, the definition of a woman, femininity and its virtues, wedded bliss, your unborn children, maternal instinct, your real job, parental authority, and your happiness. I mean, this is a comprehensive list of pretty much everything that I think would make you happy.
Yeah. Right.
Wow. How were you able to distill, I think, such broad pain and general pain I think a lot of women feel into such distinct chapters there?
I think that's just from, growing up as a liberal feminist and just being part of that world gave me a unique perspective on what women were reading and imbibing as part of the feminist package, and just being sold all of these myths. For example, that your fertility is fungible. You can delay it indefinitely as long as you want. There's no such thing as, aging out of your fertility. We have all these new reproductive magic tricks. Don't worry about that. And just basically, the way I just divided it up was just all the different things, all the different aspects of a woman's life that are touched by feminism, and the things that she does give up, and the things that you do. Really, some of them only realize this much later in life. I'll have people reach out to me on Twitter and say, you're so right. I wish I had read this 10 years ago, before I decided to wait and delay having a family, delay marriage. And now what I found out is it's too late. And my perspective is that it was almost too late for me. I got married met my husband in late 20s. I started having children in my early 30s. My first pregnancy ended in a miscarriage, and so, fortunately I was able to have 5 children. I feel very blessed, but the idea that I almost missed out on having, a family size that I consider to be, not even that big compared to some Catholic families I know, but, bigger than my friends who all stopped at 2,
Right.
And I should say my former friends, who definitely do not approve of my extreme lifestyle at all. And so I just divided it up by just looking at all the ways women have been kind of lied to, tricked. They're told, settling down is bad. Getting married young is just utter taboo. And wanting to become a mother in your 20s is like, why would you give up your life? Why would you, as Barack Obama said, want to be punished with a baby in the prime of your youth, in the prime of your fertility? Can you imagine why would you do that? What a crazy thing to do. And certainly if I had ever said to my peers when I was, let's say 25, guys, my goal is not to just like keep going out to parties. My goal is to find a husband, fall in love, and immediately have some children. It would just, it would have been like telling them I was moving to, Mars. It's just not something that women can even handle if you grow up as a mainstream feminist. And unfortunately, these messages are the mainstream. There is no alternative offered to young people outside of people who grew up in, literally like religious communities, unless you're being raised as a Catholic, and not just a Catholic, as a devout traditional Catholic. You're not really going to hear any of these messages anywhere else.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you touched on it. There's a religious element to this. And in your personal story as well, you converted to Catholicism, obviously after growing up as an atheist. How did that conversion look for you? Tell me about that story.
If you had told me when I was a teenager that one day I'd be this devout Catholic, I would have laughed in your face. I was an unlikely candidate. But basically, my husband and I got married. Like I said, we had, unfortunately, a miscarriage. The baby was 12 weeks, so it was a huge shock. It was our first pregnancy, and we were just like totally devastated, unprepared for that scenario. And he had been baptized as a baby. His father was a fallen away Catholic. And we were, in mourning. We were really kind of like broken for like a full week, or, we just couldn't get out of bed even. And he said to me right after, he's like, well, I can't deal with this, so I'm going to convert to Catholicism. And I was like, okay, well, that's your journey. I'm not going to stop someone from doing that, but I was definitely like not ready to do that myself. But he did have a family background. His father had been like an altar boy as a child. He had grown up around these stories. So he felt like that's what I need to do something. And so he did the whole process of conversion, RCIA, and the whole thing. And I just, as a supportive wife, I tried to support him as best I could. And the process of going with him to Mass every Sunday, starting then, was really how my conversion began, and meeting some of the priests, the very, these were incredible men of faith that I was meeting, and just the way they would talk, I would meet with them and I would talk to them, and I was like, I'm not really ready. And they would just talk to me, and they were so kind and so generous. And afterwards, after I converted, my husband told me that, they would always tell him, whatever you do, don't push her. Don't make her do it. She has to kind of go along. And so just as a process really of learning and being educated, I knew nothing about Catholicism or the church. And so just, and then I kept getting pregnant. So that kind of delayed my entry. I was like, had 3 under 3 at one point.
That's extreme.
And then finally, yeah, I didn't know where shoes were for like 5 years, So as soon as I could find a pair of matching shoes, I was like, okay, I'm ready to do this. So it was a few years after him. And I just went to the local parish and I signed up for RCIA.
Wow, that's amazing. I know so many people, I think it's Bishop Barron has a quote about how we basically try to convince people to Catholicism with facts and logic, when in reality, you need to enter through the door of beauty. And I was just curious, during this process of going to Mass and meeting with the priest, was there something that you recognized in that experience that was different than kind of the secular maybe joys that you had experienced previously? Like, was there a distinct change of character, I guess, in seeing these church communities and priests?
Yeah, I mean, being around, we started hanging around with like Catholic families, and the level of love and acceptance, for me, even though I wasn't yet fully, integrated into the church yet, but just, I was already kind of, pro-life and a social conservative and all that. And just like the love and acceptance and seeing these women who were really, they were domestic extremists. They were extremely domestic and they had lots of kids. And they were so much cooler and so much more interesting than the liberal feminists I had known my whole life. I didn't have to hide who I was, how I felt about the world, how I felt about motherhood. It was like, it was weird. It was like going to a place where you are no longer an enemy who has to hide your secret, your evil, your bad side, It was a place of like warm acceptance. And I was like, oh my goodness, like I want to just be whatever this is. Like, this is where I need to be.
Yeah, that's so amazing. And one of the things that I realized in your book, and of course in your Twitter, you have a sharp sense of humor, clearly throughout this interview, I think it's coming up. And I actually really appreciate that. I think that it reminds me a little bit of a happy warrior ethos, because you talk about tough things. Of course, like all of the lies of feminism, what it's taken from women, how it's really hard. And we're talking about abortion, like taking life, like that's heavy. And yet you're able to kind of say the truth, tell the truth, while also being specific and not kind of offering disclaimers, having a good sense of humor about no disclaimers. So like you were very specific about, hey, this is what it's taking from you. You could have this, but it's not there. I'm not going to add a disclaimer because, some women, maybe this and that, you just kind of tell the truth. How do you get past the natural inclination, I think, and even I struggle with this sometimes, to just offer disclaimers and not try to offend everyone?
Right. I mean, I think I'm in too deep now to worry about if I'm going to offend anyone. You know what I mean? It's too late for me. I really do feel like I've burned those bridges, and that's fine. There's no going back for me. And I think there's incredible moral clarity and courage in basically taking a stand. And I'm not saying I'm courageous. I aspire to courage a lot of the time, but I feel like if I don't say these things, I want someone to say these things. And so if that's going to be me, then it's going to have to be me. And I'll take the heat. I mean, and humor is a great shield. Humor is a great way to deliver a message that is potentially controversial and harsh or edgy or whatever. But it's like the spoonful of sugar makes the medicine go down. And it also, I feel like, draws people in. This is really just how I talk and how I write. My writing is very much the way I am in real life. I don't like things to be dry. I want to entertain my readers. And people have said they've enjoyed the book. They've laughed out loud. That like thrills me to no end. My evil strategy is working. But I feel like there are so many ways to present these ideas that are, they're fairly dry, they're fairly direct, they're fairly like academic. And I'm not an academic. I'm not a theologian. I'm not a social scientist. I'm coming at this from a perspective of just like a woman who was a writer. I was a writer for many years for big corporations. And I just kind of experienced this like lifestyle change. And so I'm coming at it from that angle, from like kind of an entertainment writer perspective. My Gen X cynicism is hard to tamp down.
Yeah, it's so cool. I'm trying to think of the right way to say this, because I recognize it actually both within the Catholic Church and within secular circles. There's the hammer that is often used is you're not being inclusive and you're not being kind. Like thinking of Jesus as nice. Like often they're like, well, Jesus was nice. And of course, there's no mention of nice in the Bible. So you see kind of like with the synod going on in the Catholic Church of the inclusion and listening and the treatment of like gay blessings, things like that. But then also in the secular world of like, well, you can literally be a woman, Tom, if you want to. Like that's inclusive somehow. What I admire most, I think, about your brand of writing and your method of communicating is it's funny, yes, but it's true. So how do you think about when you deliver that message, and how do you think about staying close to the truth, talking to both people that maybe are too sensitive in both areas?
Yeah, I do get critique that I'm too mean sometimes. I'm too, I make fun of people on the left. I make fun of feminists. I feel like these people, I feel like mockery is one of our very few rhetorical weapons that we have. Making fun of things and skewering them and calling them out in a light way. I'm not calling for anything to be bad to happen to them. I pray for these people, but I feel like that is completely okay to do. And I think that we need to be less scared to call things out. I sometimes get in trouble with my Catholic friends when I criticize or make comments about Pope Francis, who I believe he's the Pope, but I do not believe in many of the things that he teaches. I feel like they are actually antithetical in a way, dancing around heresy. So, and I get in trouble. Like, well, you have to be obedient. You have to, and it's like, well, that's hard for me. I struggle with that. I struggle with that a lot. But yes, like you said about disclaimers, I think that there's just you're just basically allowing you're apologizing. And as soon as you're apologizing, you're losing. And why bother? Read your message. You're just undercutting every single thing you believe in and every single thing that you're saying. What is the point?
If you were to speak to, say, I'm 25, if you were to talk to another 25-year-old woman right now, sit her down, who is kind of in that quasi left-leaning state where maybe they don't fully believe it, but they're just kind of going along with the times. If you were to give them, a distilled game plan to becoming happy, because I think when you follow the truth, you are happy. So what advice would you give to someone in that seat?
Well, it depends on if they're going to behead me if I start talking to them. As long as they're slightly receptive.
No beheading.
Okay, good. So, the first thing is I would say to young women is to delete your dating apps. The dating apps have caused so much grief and pain and are really sucking the life force out of young women and young men. Okay, both. They're just basically a merry-go-round that you're going to get on and you're never going to get off because the apps are designed to keep you a repeat customer. They're not designed to find you your soulmate in the shortest possible time. I would say to someone that, many, many testimonials of married people they'll say, my life really began when I met my future spouse. My life really began when I finally became a mother or a father. Everything else is a blur. None of that stuff mattered. I wish I could take back a lot of the stuff I did, but this is where my life begins. And so I would explain to a young woman, I think the wisdom of people who have had these live longer is extremely valuable. The question is, will they listen? Don't you want your real life to start as early as possible and do all those things together as like a loving, cohesive unit? Sometimes I think, my husband and I have lamented, like we didn't meet each other earlier in life. What was I, 28 or something when I met him? And sometimes I think, wow, it would have been so awesome to have met him earlier and to not have been alone, and doing life alone. And so when you have your life partner, your spouse, things, it's not always easy. There's ups and downs. And life is hard no matter what, single or married, but it would have been so much better.
Yeah, totally.
And the other thing is I remind young women is that many older people, dozens of women have said to me, I wish I had one more child. They've said this so many times. I feel like that's one of the reasons behind the book. Many women, for whatever reason, their career, the economy, their husband didn't want another kid. They stopped at 2 kids. And they regretted that. And they still regret that till the day they die. On their deathbed, they will regret that. I have regrets that I've written about of not having one more. Because at the time I had, I was dealing with some medical issues. And so I was taking a break. We took a 4-year break before my last baby. And to this day, I think, oh no, what, who did I miss out on? And so I think that when you're so young, it's so hard to think about things you'll regret when you're 60 or 70. How do you even put that in your brain? But as a Catholic, one of the gifts of Catholicism is confronting mortality. When you're a secular atheist, you don't think about death.
This is true.
Death is you don't know if you see a live chicken, you're not around when it gets beheaded and its feathers get plucked. It just gets wrapped in nice, clean plastic at the supermarket. You don't see the ugly part, right?
Yeah.
But as a Catholic, you are forced to confront death. Like, you're going to die. This is going to end. It's going to end much, much, much faster than you think.
Yeah.
When you're 25, you really do feel like I'll be 25 forever. I thought that.
Wait, I'm not going to be?
No, I know. And I try to work backwards in life. Where do you want to be when you're 60, 70, 80? Do you want to be alone?
Okay, so to those who don't want to be alone and have now deleted their dating apps, I'm just speaking from experience. I have a lot of friends that are Catholic. They live in a city and are frustrated with the apps, of course, but have a hard time meeting people because I think society's gone so digital that that's almost become the norm. And there's not really the same social spaces that maybe existed before. So delete the apps, gone. How would you recommend meeting a meaningful partner to someone that's maybe in that seat where they've deleted the apps, they're in a city, but maybe don't know exactly how to meet the right people? Yeah,
it's so difficult. I mean, I think since COVID, real life events and real life mingling has kind of become very difficult to put together. I'm hearing this from, friends who are younger, that we used to have such a robust social scene. I mean, I think that does still exist, especially in cities. There's bars and restaurants and clubs and I don't know what else, concerts to go to. But if you're not living in a place that is going to be, let's say, a target-rich environment, a place with, let's say, a lot of young, attractive women who will be receptive to you, the toxic male, the toxic Catholic male or whatever, who wants a traditional marriage, okay, which is a good thing. That's all good. If you're living in the West Village of New York City or, Hollywood or something, you're going to have slim pickings. And so I would suggest to those people to quickly hook up with friends who have met people who are somehow, on the same page. What's helpful is if you have friends who went to Catholic colleges, the ones who seem to kind of get engaged in college, there are these Catholic colleges out there where people, when you get your Mrs. degree, okay, great. Exactly. So they just need to call you and say, can your college friends set me up with one of their sisters or something? That's the shortcut.
It has happened before. I went to Ave Maria University. I got married when I was a senior in college, or I got engaged when I was a senior in college. So,
nice. Did you like Ave Maria?
True. Loved Ave Maria. Yeah, I'll be the first to say, highly recommend. It's a fantastic school. It's a school that takes its Catholic identity very seriously. And
it's in Florida, yeah.
I mean, it's hard to argue with the weather's pretty sweet. But the type of people that send their kids into colleges may be considered like homesteaders, I think, by the public stretch of the imagination. So for people that read this book and they're like, Peachy is encouraging me to homestead, but they say live in a suburb or they live in a city. What would you say to people like that? Like, I would like to live this lifestyle, but obviously just not the country, completely isolated from everyone else.
Right. Yeah, I definitely address this in my book. I have never milked a goat. You're welcome, goats. I have never touched a loom. To become a domestic extremist, you do not need to own a butter churn. You do not need to make your own clothing. Okay. If you do all those things, that is fine. God bless you. I am envious of your lifestyle. Becoming a domestic extremist, you can do from your 1-bedroom apartment in a big city, from your suburban house, anywhere in the world. Okay. You can become a domestic extremist right this minute. You do not need to run off to the woods. If we all ran off to the woods would be really crowded.
Okay. True.
I was raised in big cities my whole life. Mowing the lawn is something that I hire the gardener to do. Okay. I'm not a farmer. I never will be a farmer. I'm so sorry. I've lived in LA and New York. I can't, I admire women who do that lifestyle. I'm not that's not me. I'm a trad wife, but I'm a trad wife who from the outside looks like a normal person walking around. I don't wear the skirts. I don't have, and if you do, God bless you. But yeah, you do not need to be a homesteader. Now, the homesteaders, however, are a very potent force in this country. I think they are, when the apocalypse happens, whatever happens, we're all going to be running to their barns, to please feed us, right. Please take care of us. But they're just not, right now, they're not enough of them to be, to save the country, to save Western civilization. We kind of all have to be, homesteaders in our mind and break ourselves off from mainstream American culture. But we have to just do it. We can do it wherever we are. We can just start today. There's no need to buy a farm yet.
Yeah. And as someone who's pretty popular online. Did you see the trends, like the trad wife trends, where people are basically caricaturing like what they think a traditional wife looks like on TikTok?
Yes. Yes, I wrote about them.
Why do you think that happened? That's just such an odd thing for me to observe.
Well, I think it's a trend, and I think there was one trad wife on TikTok who was basically presenting like a 1950s kind of Marilyn Monroe girl, and she would lean over with her like low cut little shirt with her pot, present her homemade pies. But this woman was childless. Okay, so
we're talking about the same woman I'm thinking of. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, that's how you know if someone is an actual trad or not. Like, how many kids do you have? Because the real trad wives don't have time to do their hair or do their makeup. Okay, they do not look cute. They don't.
Record themselves for hours of content, I guess, on TikTok.
They do not have time to do the homemade apple pie. They're like barely holding it together because they have multiple children in diapers. Okay, and so yeah, they'll pull themselves together when they have a minute, but they're not sewing their own corsets. Like, that's not a thing. So yeah, she's cute. That's cute. You can LARP it all you want. I mean, sometimes I think maybe you have to fake it till you make it. So maybe if you aspire to the
Good
trad
point.
girl life, okay, trad girl dinner or whatever, then maybe you'll make it like, oh, I actually do like feeding my husband, and maybe I actually want to have a baby, and that would be so cute. Whatever gets you there, that's fine.
Yeah, you got to hook them somehow. It's a little bit of honeypot. So
there's a honeypot. That's true.
One thing that I wanted to ask you, because you're kind of involved in the circles now, you're in too deep, as we say.
Yeah.
There is a taboo about working women in trad circles, which is I have my own personal thoughts on that, but it definitely exists within traditional Catholic circles. And I have to point this out. You worked for a long time. You wrote a book. We're doing this interview. What would you say to people that maybe see your lifestyle working as like hypocritical, I guess, for the domestic? Like, how would you answer the people that are like, women should never work, they should always be in the kitchen, that kind of thing?
I mean, that's ridiculous. I don't think I think women should have the right to work. I think they should have the choice to have a career, to be a CEO. My question is, girls, why do you want that? I worked for a long time. In an office, and before I had children, and I have yet to meet one female who enjoyed it. Not one. Okay. They were always like, I hate my job. It sucks. Like, always. I'd never met a single person who was like loving life I guess there are some now. They've been kind of like psyoped into it because they can like make cute TikToks about their day at the office or whatever. With their like lattes.
Not doing any work, by the way. Yeah.
No work involved. Yeah, I mean, I graduated college. I started working it right away. I always supported myself as a, professional writer. I was a copywriter. I worked at for big corporations for a long time. But when I had my first child, I kind of intuitively knew that I was not going to hand him off to someone to raise for me. That was just not even a question. Like, you would have had to, I would have gnawed off my own arm, I like to say, if you had tried to get him out of my arms. Like, from my cold, dead fingers, you'll pry this baby from me. I wanted to nurse him and be his mother. Basic, right? And I did freelance. So for a long time, I would like freelance write, work from home. I had clients. I would do conference calls like in my closet, holding the door shut while a toddler screamed, banging on the door, nursing the baby while I typed. I mean, that was my life for a long time. So no, women absolutely should have the choice to work. If you have a passion, we need women there are women in the workplace. We need women to be I think I wouldn't send my child to a school where they were being taught by men in preschool. I would like women to teach preschool. There are certain jobs that I think only women should do, quite frankly. I think most of my children's teachers are women. I think women make fantastic nurses. What would we do without nurses? And lots of other jobs that women do a wonderful job on. I'm not saying do not work. I think my point is that women now no longer have the choice to work. It is an imperative. It's both an economic imperative and it's a social imperative. You are not contributing to society, and your main value for society is through your career, to contribute to the economy, to be a working woman. And any kind of family or husband you want is a distraction. And that's going to make you economically lesser off. You're going to be a drain on society. If you do decide to have kids, we are going to give you short maternity leave and get you right back to work as soon as possible, thanks to daycare, subsidized daycare, all those things, right?
Abortion policy.
And abortion, I talk about this in the book, the egg freezing. Egg freezing has become one of the key HR benefits that companies now offer women to hire them. Because come to work, you can freeze your eggs, you can freeze your fertility. And it's a big draw. Oh, I get to it's free. I can freeze my eggs and have a family later when I'm 45. After you've worked, given your best years given your fertility to your company, then we'll let you unfreeze your family. And what they don't tell you is that you can freeze your eggs, but you can't freeze your uterus. You can't freeze your body. So women who are like, let's say in their 40s, who unfreeze their eggs, what they quickly will find is that the IVF won't work on them. They're just too old. And the chances of one IVF cycle resulting in a pregnancy is something like 6 or 7%, and that's in a younger woman. So if you're in your mid-40s hoping to use your frozen eggs, your chances of conceiving with every cycle of IVF is extremely low. And so that means you inevitably will have to hire a surrogate. Okay, so now there's another woman involved and you have to get the sperm donor. So this is not, I think, a viable solution.
It's definitely not morally acceptable either, because we're not even talking about all the frozen fetuses that now are...
Forget the morality of it. It's a nightmare just from top to bottom. And so I think that work is something that is fine. Like you said, right now I work from home. I work when my children are in school. There are ways to do it. I think that women have to understand that there is a season to everything. And when I had young kids at home, my season was staying home with my children. And they actually went to school and I went back to work. I worked in the office again at a very large entertainment company. I got pregnant again with my 5th baby. And I was like, well, I'm not going to come back, obviously. And people were shocked and horrified to learn that I was quitting. I was making over 6 figures. I had gold-plated benefits. I had unbelievable, it was like a dream job in many ways for someone like a copywriter. And they were shocked that I would give it up. They were shocked. What about daycare? Why don't you get a nanny? And I would be like, no, I actually want to raise my own infant. And it was like their minds would just explode. Like, what do you mean? But Susie came back at 6 weeks. And these younger millennial women would come back to work after having their one baby. And they'd all say, I'm one and done. Just my one kid. That's it. They would come back when the baby was 6 weeks old. And I'd be like, where's your baby?
Yeah.
And they'd be like, oh, Timmy's at school. And they would call daycare school. And they would kind of like, wow. Oh, it was really hard to drop him off that first morning. I cried, but he seems okay. Anyway. And I would just be like, I can't, like, who has been telling them this? That you don't need the money that bad. There's no amount of money. Like I would tell my husband, if we can't like survive here in LA on your income for now, I'll happily move to a trailer. Like I'll live in Arkansas. Like I don't care. And he was like, I know, like we're going to make it work. And we did. It was a huge sacrifice, but there was no other alternative. Do you know what I mean?
And why did you feel as though there was no other alternative?
I think in me that, maybe thanks to my conversion to conservatism and to Catholicism, that my maternal bond, my maternal instinct was kind of still fully intact. And I think that is because I became pro-life, honestly. And I think what becoming pro-choice does to a young woman is it kind of emotionally, psychologically, she is forced to sever her maternal bond with any future children. That enables her to sell her eggs to the highest bidder. The egg selling industry is huge. That enables her to get abortions and not cry at night about it. And that enables them to hand their baby over at 6 weeks to a daycare, a minimum wage person. So when you grow up in the pro-choice mindset, your maternal instinct is just by that nature of that decreased so much that you aren't as intensely affected or even aren't allowed to express how you feel about leaving your baby behind to go back to the office, to go back to your job. It's like this deep psychological, almost brainwashing that has been done to women who are stuck in the cult of feminism that enables them so easily to relinquish their children and go back to their jobs. So I think thanks to my, the fact that I was Catholic and I was conservative, my feelings about my own infants were intact. And I was able to very clearly understand that the only place that I needed to be was with my infant.
So I think that's a really profound thought on human dignity. And I think Catholicism, actually, that's where Catholicism really does shine. One thing I always tell my friends too is when you are dating or you're looking for a partner to potentially marry, I'd say look very closely at their views on human life. So if they are pro-choice,
it's true.
If you think about if they're pro-choice in this scenario, this could potentially be the mother of your child. Because typically I'm talking to men. So what type of decisions, even if it's not abortion, would they be willing to make? And I think you articulated that so well. If I could say, and I think this comes across in your book, of course, but here for this interview, we talk about building a culture of human dignity. I think sometimes when people think about domestically extreme, it's like, let's leave society, let's become isolationist. I know we kind of established that's not what the book is about. Of course, you can do it everywhere. But how do we continue to build, I think, in Catholic circles, you hear the culture of life, or a culture that celebrates human dignity and that allows mothers to raise their children and that can have these households intact, to have close family units? Like, how would you recommend building that practically in your local community?
I mean, like I say in the book, it's really a case of there's strength in numbers. And it's a numbers game, and we have to increase our own numbers. I mean, I'm the first person in my family to kind of adopt this lifestyle. Maybe back in the old country, I have like a great-great-grandmother who was a domestic extremist who had a lot of kids, but that has been lost over the last 2 or 3 generations of people who came to America and embraced American life, and suddenly they're not having any kids. So I'm hoping that my own children, will start this new tradition in my family of living this lifestyle that was considered normal not that long ago, of having, more than 2 children, staying married, understanding what life, unborn life is, understanding what it means to be chaste, to be modest, the value of fidelity in a relationship, all of these things that were considered very basic, which have been lost. So I'm just trying to teach my children. There's no guarantees. I can't guarantee you that they'll all turn out the way I am hoping they will. I mean, so far it seems like we're going to have a good shot at getting a lot of grandchildren. My oldest son he definitely wants to get married young. He definitely wants to have a lot of kids. I'm very hopeful. It really does start with us, I feel like. There's no way I can go and tell my neighbors, who have no children and will never have any children. I can't really, it's too late for me to have any impact on them. But I think we can lead by example. Like you said, I don't like to hit people over the head. I'm not going to go on a pulpit and start screaming, you need to get married and have kids. Sometimes people say to me like, oh, so you just want everyone to get married? Like, no, there's a lot of people who have disqualified themselves out of marriage, and you can see them. If you go to like a, Democrat rally or a pro-choice rally, you can see what I'm talking about. I don't recommend shacking up with those broads. Okay. You're in for a world of hurt if you do. Okay. So when I say, no, these people they're saying they'll abort your baby and they do not want to marry you. They're in polycules, they're open marriages. Okay. Avoid them. And when your enemy is making a mistake, don't interrupt them. I feel like, people make fun of me like for saying this, but can we over time outbreed the other side? They're choosing self-sterilization. They're actually choosing it. They're sterilizing themselves. These women have up-armored their innards to prevent any chance of pregnancy forever, basically. And they're also insanely sterilizing their own children by putting them on things like puberty blockers, which, forgot to tell you, causes permanent sterility.
Yeah.
I mean, they're basically sterilizing their children and guaranteeing they'll never be grandmothers.
There's arguments to be made that's a little bit more extreme than staying home, staying married, and raising your kids.
No, no, we're the extremists. Not that they're normal. We're the extremists.
We are the extreme ones. I completely
yeah.
agree with that advice. So Peachy, I had to do this, because you have a Twitter account, you are anonymous. There are some very funny tweets on this account, and not to be the guy that's like, oh, I'm going to go back at old tweets and cancel you. I'm not here to do that. I'm not here to do that. I saw some funny ones that I would like to bring up to your attention.
Okay.
First one, hear me out. Footloose, but a kid from a free red state who moves to a blue extremist lockdown state, and he has to teach his stunted conformist new classmates how to have fun again. Did you sell the rights to this movie yet, or are you hanging on to it?
Isn't that great? People were DMing me about that for months, saying like, you have to make this, you have to write this. I agree. I have not yet had a chance to write that script. I actually would love to. And basically, if you remember the movie Footloose, it's a boy from New York City who moves to a small, very religious town where all dancing and music has been banned because it leads to sin, right? Kevin Bacon, I don't know if this is like an 80s movie that I love so much.
I'm familiar with I'm familiar. I'm not that young. I'm familiar. Yeah.
It's so good. So he basically, gets them all to dance again and brings back dancing. They're allowed to have a prom, and it's pretty wholesome. And so that's my idea, that it's the opposite. It's a red state kid who gets transferred or whatever to a private woke school in like the Bay Area or something, where being heterosexual and cisgendered is like not allowed. Okay,
we're getting there.
And all the girls at the high school are like non-binary or whatever. Okay, and so he is just going to have to convert them back to 80s style heterosexual like crushes and stuff. Right? I have a hit. It's a hit.
And we might be in conversations with CatholicVote after this one. Hang on to that. Don't sell that one away. We might be interested in the concept.
Okay, good.
So I have your most popular tweet. It's been liked 237,000 times, if you know what I'm going to say. The girl Leonardo DiCaprio will dump when he's 72 was born today. You were actually quoted. Congratulations. You were quoted in page 6.
That's right.
We have the girl Leonardo DiCaprio will dump when he's 72 today. Someone tweeted, and they linked you. How does it feel to be published in that way?
Well, they didn't even say my name. That's so funny. I wrote that tweet when I was waiting outside my little daughter's ballet class. I was just sitting on a stoop, and I just DiCaprio had just dumped another girl on her 26th birthday. And so I wrote that, and then I started getting notifications. It went all over the world. I was getting notifications and DMs in like multiple languages. And then it went to Asia, and it came around again. That tweet was a good one. I realized actually the way to increase my profile is to just make Leonardo DiCaprio jokes. Forget Catholic mom posting. I'm just going to make Hollywood celebrity jokes from now on.
You really have chosen the wrong path. I think by rounding people up with politics, you should just stick to Leo jokes. I think you'd kill.
Agreed. Exactly.
And then for
Leo,
those
call
curious,
me. I can fix you.
Read my book. For those who are curious, Peachy Keenan, where did that name come from, and why do you have that profile picture, the art profile picture?
Oh, my avatar on Twitter is actually from a painting by Perugia of Mary Magdalene. And so I thought that was appropriate, like a former sinner who turned good. And I also like the look on her face. Her disapproving look was, I think, very funny to me. The name Peachy Keenan, I had been on Twitter since about 2016, but I had gotten banned. I think I said some like mean things to Barack Obama or something, and Twitter used to ban you.
Did you say a man was a woman or something? Or you said man can't be woman or something like that?
Nothing. I just, stupid things. But in those days, Twitter would ban you for any criticism of anyone on the left. And so I had to have a new account, and it just popped into my head. And it's ironic because Peachy Keen means everything's great, but it's also ironic because things are not peachy keen. Things are very far from peachy keen. And so I thought, that's funny because it sounds like a name. I'll just make it Keenan. And then right after that, I started writing for The American Mind, which is a magazine through Claremont. And actually, the very first article that I sent them was called, "And You Call Yourself a Christian?" Because I had seen this, and I hope you have time for me, I'll just really quickly tell you the story. I had seen Tucker Carlson on some show on TV, and he was saying something against, about how we should build the wall. We should limit immigration on our southern border. We should control our border, like very common sense ideas. And this left-wing journalist said, well, how can you call yourself a Christian and also call for limiting immigration? How dare you? You call yourself a Christian? And I realized that I'd heard that kind of tactic before used against Christians and against Catholics. If you dare to speak out about certain issues, for example, you don't want children getting transgender surgeries. Oh, and you call yourself a Christian? You want them to kill themselves unless you approve their, bottom surgery or whatever. And about immigration, you want to restrict unlimited immigration from the South. How dare you? Those people are suffering. You call yourself a Christian. And so that was actually my first, the first thing I ever wrote as Peachy.
Wow. And, I have to bring this up because this is your hometown team, the LA Dodgers. Fortunately, got swept out of the playoffs after winning 100 games by the Diamondbacks. And if you remember, they honored the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence, the black-faced drag nuns, as we call them. And this was my experience with this because I have a lot less time trading barbs on Twitter than you do probably. But my experience was I basically said, with the pole dancing on the cross, it's like, how could you not see this as offensive to Christians? Like, this is open blasphemy. They drink semen out of chalices. It's the most disgusting, demonic, blasphemous stuff I've ever seen. Surely we could all get on the same page and call it for what it is, right? And so I called someone out. I was like, look, like, this is clearly blasphemy to Catholics. And they're like, they're just dressing up. It's just clothes. Like, why do you care? Why don't you accept them for whatever? And that was the moment for me. I was like, it does not matter. They don't care. It's not about logic. They will defend anything and everything. So of course they threw at me, oh, don't you call yourself a Christian? Don't you have empathy and love for these people who've dealt with AIDS and they're oppressed and they're judged?
Why do you
and
hate gay people?
Yeah, exactly. And so I think why I was looking forward to having you on, and I've kind of admired you from afar, is that you cut through that BS pretty quickly. Aren't you Christian? Aren't you Catholic? Don't you? They're just trying to label you, and you continue to not let them label you. And I really admire that. So thank you so much for coming on the show. For people that want to follow your work and get more of you, maybe buy the book, where can they do so?
You can follow me on Twitter. I'm at Keenan Peachy. You can follow me on Substack, peachykeenan.substack.com. And the book, Domestic Extremist, is available on Amazon and everywhere books are sold.
Awesome. Stay extreme. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you.